There was a specific instance where I was building a prop for an OMG video, so like a kid directed music video that we were doing. And I was quickly trying to build like a TV out of cardboard. And I look over and they're shooting it already with Calder's TV that he built out of cardboard. And I was like, oh, I was literally putting this together. And then like at lunch, I sat down next to him and I was like, hey, like that was crazy. I was building a TV. You were building a TV. You finished it quicker. Like, I was like, and then he was like, yeah, man. He's like, well, the thing that I've learned in this industry is that like, it's not a prop if it's not ready for camera.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the About Story podcast. My name is Nathan Johnson, and today I'm joined by Jeffrey Prosser. Jeffrey,
how's it going?
Good man. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Jeffrey, you are a writer, director, and recently I know you've been working on a lot of music videos. Let's hear a little bit about you.
So yeah, I came to LA actually to go to Biola University. So I came out in 2013 to go to film school. I did 2.5 years at Biola, and then transitioned into life in LA after that, like a lot of film students do after college.
Yeah, and where did you move from?
I moved from Visalia, California, so my hometown. Yeah. So I grew up in the Central Valley. We didn't have like a lot of film there at the time, but we did have a lot of theater arts. So I actually grew up doing a lot of theater. Came out to film school, left my theater days behind me a little bit, and started learning about how like to direct cinematically and all of that in school. And like I was like a filmmaker by hobby all through my youth, but it wasn't until I came to like film school that I started learning how to professionally put things together, you know, with crews and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's very different. It's a whole different beast.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like I was like born of the DIY generation, you know, so I was putting together, I literally was like going to Home Depot and buying like rails and making the sliders. I was that guy, you know, in my hometown. Like everybody else was like, what are you doing? And I was like, God, we got to get that nice smooth shot, you know?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the way that I made movies with friends. You know, I'd get my theater actor friends together and we would make like a very almost THX inspired fight film that we did, like a laboratory kind of style, like sci-fi film inspired by early THX
George Lucas.
Early George Lucas stuff.
Yeah.
So like that was like something that I like made when I was in high school, and then we kind of went from there to like I was making like thrillers and stuff with my friends. So I was really into making like psychological thrillers and like fight movies in high school and stuff.
Those are the best.
Yeah. And so then from there it kind of like led to me getting introduced into the art of movie making a little bit more when I went to a summer school in Valencia at Cal Arts. And it's called CISA, California State Summer School of the Arts. And I went in 2009. It was actually like a really big moment for me because like we started shooting on all these different formats. Like I learned how to shoot on like 16 and Super 8 and all these things. And I had never shot on film before that. So at 16, you know, I walked in and thought I had known how to make movies, and they were like, oh, have you ever shot on film? And then there was also like found footage classes where we were like editing, you know, together stuff and learning experimental forms of filmmaking. So that was kind of the moment where I went like, okay, this is what I want to do. I don't actually want to go to school for theater and be an actor. I want to actually like make films, and whether they're experimental or art house or full-on narrative, I'm interested in this. Like, this is what I want to do. So it's like around 16 years old that I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And I decided I was going to find a film school and come out to LA and make it a thing.
And what brought you to Biola?
Biola was, you know, on a list of schools I was checking out. My sister had actually gone there. She had gone there for communications disorders, so nothing related to the arts, but she was always talking it up, and I was visiting her when she was like away to college and stuff. So it was on my radar. I was interested in it for its hands-on education, or not hands-on, I guess I was like, it was very personal. It seemed very personal when I visited the campus. Yeah. You know, I wanted to go to like USC or UCLA or something like that. And I applied to all those schools, didn't get into the film program. And I was like, well, here's this school right here, and they're offering me scholarships. And there's a lot of educators that seem like really hands-on. So it just really drew me in. Yeah. And then they were all about like, we want the students to be given proper attention and really heard. And that environment was just like, I was like, cool, let's go, you know? So I came out and I was a transfer student. So like I came in from doing theater for 2 years in college, and that was really what I was studying. Like I was doing like Shakespeare, and all of my mentors at the time were like, "You're gonna go to be an actor, right? Like you're auditioning," and I was like, "No, I'm going to a film school. Like that's what I want to do." So that was like a really strange time for me because like I really like felt compelled to make this sort of like transition and do this with my career. And I was still pretty young, obviously, and I had a lot of years of experience acting. And so it was like a weird thing where it's like I knew I needed to do this, but everyone around me,
shift,
my parents and everybody was supportive. It was like my family knew that I was like just a creative person and wanted to do what I wanted to do. But I think it was just like for me, there was this feeling of like leaving something behind, walking away from doing so much theater and being involved in that. So that was like a big shift, and then I came out to LA and I was like, all right, well, we're here, and music videos kind of fell into my lap in a way. Like I'm not, that's still not like the one thing I want to do. And it's just something that like, it's a community I kind of walked into right when I came out to LA. I found myself in the middle of a big epicenter of music video directors with this nonprofit camp, OMG Everywhere. And I had volunteered at it, and it was kind of like what set the stage for a lot of other things that are going on for me professionally now and stuff. Yeah,
that's awesome. So what's it like working on music videos? Like what's kind of the process?
So usually an artist will approach with a brief. The brief will usually consist of like, here's the song, usually like a link to a private song, unreleased song. If it's through like a big label, especially, they'll have like all these like portals you have to go through, and it's really annoying because if you need to listen to the song over and over, you have to like be on this weird link. You can't just like download it and listen to it. So that'll be kind of like one thing that will be on the brief is like a link, and then it'll say like the budget that they have allocated for the single, and then it might have some creative ideas or notes that the artist is like interested in exploring with this, or it might just be a description of why they wrote the song. And they'll send that out, and they'll be looking for people to pitch on that. So that brief will come to me, and then I'll be writing on it. So I'll do my take on what I think would be a cool music video for the song, usually in a pretty visual form. Like you don't really want to make your music video brief extremely like
wordy
literature, they want to get something that looks cool because that's what they're going for with, they wrote the song and they want a visual. So you're pitching the visual, but you can include some notes in there, and really tell a story. And so that's usually what I try to do is I try to kind of like package what ideas came to me when I was listening to it on repeat. And it always feels like a little bit like a puzzle you're trying to solve when you're listening to like a song and you're like, okay, what is the movie for this? Or like, I don't know, the way I look at it is like, how can I build on this? Like, not just like, what's the perfect music video for this song? Cause then you get, kind of overwhelmed, but I'm more looking at it like, what is like a way I can kind of like take what I'm hearing here and actually open it up a little bit. And that usually turns into some kind of a treatment that has like a lot of visual references along with like an arc, maybe like a page that just shows generally the look and the feel and the vibe kind of the video. And the artists, like, I mean, a lot of these artists are getting like tons of these. So you want something that's pretty eye-catching right away and kind of pulls them in, because it might just be a stack, just like a lot of like Hollywood producers have a stack of scripts, like a lot of agents and managers of artists will just have like a stack of treatments come into their inbox, and it's like, if they don't know you, it's just got to be eye-catching.
Yeah. So do you work with like an artist, or do you have maybe like a DP that you work with pretty often? Like what's your creative process like there?
Yeah. So usually like the process of finding the team comes either like right after I like book the job, or maybe while I'm in the process of finding out, I'll start reaching out. It depends on the scale of what we're making. Like if it's got a kind of a medium-sized budget, I mean, music videos typically are known for not having great budgets, but like, if you're able to work with a little bit, you can go to a production company and get the video kind of set up there. If you have a relationship with a production company, that's something that I would do, is like kind of have them bid it out for you and make a budget. And that can kind of like help you figure out, okay, how much room in the budget is there for my dream DP or versus like one of my collaborators that'll do it for a deal, or like, will really like come out for this just because they're excited to work with me or something like that.
Right.
But I like to work with like the consistent teams. So I usually try to build.
It makes it a lot easier when you have that relationship and they know what you're thinking, you know what they're thinking, and you're just on the same page, and you don't have to like argue or like, oh well, that's not quite right. But if you're just like work
Totally.
with the same team, you gel.
Yeah. So I've definitely like been trying to find some common collaborators with like production designers, director of photography, like the key roles, you know. But it's important to like work with new people too. And I feel like my whole approach with music videos is that they're kind of like practice in a way. Like they're, I mean, it's probably not the best way to say it because you're not practicing with other people's money, but you know, it's like you're getting an opportunity to experiment visually and create something really interesting because it's a more risky medium. It allows for people to like music videos are okay with you going more towards the creative edge than a commercial
Right.
would, for
It can be more
example.
artistic, a little
Yeah.
more avant-garde or different. Yeah.
Totally. So if you come up with a concept that really pushes something that's really like someone maybe hasn't seen something like that before, you can get a team around it pretty excited to try that and maybe experiment with you. So that's usually the approach for me is like, I'm like, who would want to go down this journey with me? You know, like this is going to be a crazy one. I'll use an example. Like I had like a music video that's going to come out in a couple weeks. And it's been a journey. Like it's been like a long post process, months, if not years. But it's for a friend of mine who's the artist. So it's like allowed for us to take our time with it. I mean, the video is like extremely simple and complex at the same time. Like there's all these shots within shots, kind of like, you know, a Russian doll, like a continual zoom out. And in order to do that, we had to shoot this bedroom, like over and over and reset dress it. And we had to make it look like it was over a long period of time that this room is evolving. So I had to not only have my PD like resetting that room a million times and making that story be told through the pieces of the details that are inside this bedroom that are changing. It's supposed to be the artist's bedroom over like 10 years. And then also the DP and the gaffer had to be collaborating on like time of day because like we were shooting in a house that had windows on east and west and we could control the light from either side, right? Because you can be like, okay, this is morning, so we're gonna black out this window and shoot through light through this one. But we had to like tell a story visually of like what time of day are we at too, and we're just shooting in this room for 2 days straight, just finessing lighting, and it's the exact same frame every single time, but we're having to make that same frame look like a totally different space and time of day and stuff like that. So that was just like a huge trust on my collaborators, on the production designer and the DP. My friend Lindsay and Pedro that just did so good, like really came in. But that was like, it's a great example. This video is just a huge team collab. Like it was something that just required everyone on set had like a job. It was like, you need to be focused on this detail and I'll be focused on this detail because it's going to be we're moving through time, you know, like as we do each shot, it's just going to slightly evolve, almost like it's like shooting like a stop motion thing in a way, you know, because like camera never moved, same room, like 50 different setups. You know?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, so that was like a challenge in just how do we do this unusual concept here. It's definitely a VFX challenge. That's part of why it took so long to finish. The song's called Freeze Time, so we wanted to do a song that feels like a time capsule. So we're moving through time in the space. This crew that hopped on was like stoked on the idea. That was a lot of why they wanted to be a part of it.
Awesome. So what are some of the other music videos that maybe highlights for you that you've worked on?
It was like 2017. I made a music video for a band called Too Many Zoos. And that was shot all in one night in Brooklyn. There was some pickups. It's a long story, but basically like I had been chasing the band. I really wanted to make a music video for them.
Oh, so you were approaching them?
I was approaching them because at the time I had no legit music videos to my name. And I know how this industry works, and you have to, you know, force your way in and be like, this is what I want to do. And I was getting involved in this nonprofit and making music videos with kids, and I was around all these music video directors, and I was just like inspired by everything that all of them were doing. And so I was like, okay, this is a space I want to like be in. Who would I want to make a music video for? And this artist was just like a YouTube band that like was blowing up. Their whole thing is that they play a genre called brass house. So they like mix brass busking music with house music. And I thought that was just really interesting and creative. And there was all these ideas coming to mind. So over time, I kind of like reached out cold and got to form a relationship with them, like met them in LA when they were doing a show, kind of slowly met their manager. And then I just started sending their manager treatments, and the manager would be like, okay, well, we have this other song. You want to write on that? And I wrote like probably like 10 treatments before there was one that stuck and they had a budget at the right time. And they were like, all right, we can do this like in New York, but we need to shoot it in like 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, okay. So I actually called up my really close friend and producer, Andrew Schundler, who I'd worked with like on many projects. And he was like, all right, I'm flying out there ahead of you. And he's from New Jersey. So he like landed in New Jersey and like just started setting up the whole like where we were going to shoot, trying to lock down locations, lock down crew. And I arrived like maybe 2 days after he did, and we just went right into it. So
that's pretty wild.
Yeah, that one was like a pretty run and gun shoot for what it was. Like we were doing a lot of like action dance fighting, like kind of like old Michael Jackson videos. Okay. And I had my friend who's on Broadway choreograph it all. So he brought his friends from Aladdin Broadway out to dance in the video after they had done 2 performances that day, and did a full all-nighter with us in this like warehouse underground in Dumbo. And we were just like blocking, shooting. Like we literally had no time to spare, so we were just moving setup to setup. Yeah, I felt bad for the DP on that one. He had the camera strapped to him, and he was just like, oh man, this is a lot. It was a really fun one. So that was like the kind of my first like really ambitious entry into music videos, and that one won an award at the Nifty Festival up in Seattle. And so that was, you know, inspiring to me to be like, okay, like I can do music videos, you know, like I'll try to break into more of this. And for a while, I didn't really like book a lot of music videos. I was doing like a lot of commercial stuff that kind of pulled into that direction. And obviously like that's great money. And that was what I needed to get kind of going anyways. But I was, you know, working towards what I wanted to do next. And so I reached out to another artist friend of mine, Waju, who is like a rapper. He always has music and projects that he's like kind of working on. So I knew he'd probably have something. And that was where this video that we've been working on that I was mentioning earlier came from. So sometimes it's like, I mean, for me, I guess like in my experience, a lot of my music video projects are long, drawn out, ambitious, and with friends who are artists. But there are artists that will come and go that are like people I don't know, you know, that, you know, hear through the grapevine or send briefs in and stuff too.
Yeah. Your tenacity to like really like, I really want to do this. And so how do I go about doing this? So how do I, you know, connect with this band that I really like? And I feel like a lot of people would give up. So I think that's actually really impressive that you would go through those lengths to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I guess it's a quality of mine where I'm like, I want to do this. I'm going to just start. Yeah. And so, I mean, with that whole situation, you know, I was young too. There's some naivete in there too. I think I was just like, oh, they need music videos. Yeah. I make films. So it just seemed like, you know, why would they say no? You know, so I was just reaching out, and I think, now I'm more like calculated with how I do cold reach out, always trying to kind of like think, well, how do I prove that I can do that so that when I go to them, I'm not wasting their time or mine. Right. But, you know, I think on that one, I was just like, kind of got lucky. They needed something and they were like, hey, this guy is hungry. Yeah. So yeah, definitely like,
sometimes you just get your foot in the door.
Just got to, yeah. And I was like, I knew I didn't want to just be, you know, making ads. You know, I was like, if I'm going to be out here making ads, I also want to be out here making creative, crazy stuff. You know, I was really inspired by those directors, the Daniels, and they recently did the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And those guys actually, like, I met them as I started getting into music videos because they started the camp that the OMG camp that I run. So
oh really?
So they're a part of that, and there's all these other directors that have come through that camp too, like Warren Fu and Hiro Murai and all those guys. Like they all started it in the early 2000s together. So they had their own little community, and they were like, you know, really trying to keep a community with each other because they realized that when they're directing, they're never seeing each other. They're never on each other's sets. You know, they're hearing about each other's work, but they're not seeing each other. And so they're trying to form that community and also do it in a way where it's like, hey, how can we make music videos with kids? Because I think at the time it was like, how do we make art with kids, or just let the kids direct? Like, what happens if we just like tell them that they're allowed to make a movie and we just like help them do it, and then their idea comes to life? So that was kind of how this camp was born. And they all found community in each other doing that together every summer. And it kind of grew over time and became this like nonprofit that does camps every summer. So I just stumbled into that like right as I kind of came out of Biola, and I was like, this is a thing. Like I used to follow all these guys on Vimeo, you know? So I was just like, I felt like I was kind of in an epicenter of the music video community, which is like kind of true. It's music video community is really small, you know, take the film industry and just take a tiny drop of it. And that's music videos. So everybody kind of does know everybody, And so there's this like aspect of like, well, I'm in the room with these people, but I don't have any music videos, you know? So I think I was just like, you know, I need to like make something, you know, and I'm inspired by them, and like they did it, and like they're just, you know, making it happen with nothing. And that was something that I noticed with their work too, is like the Daniels started out with like nothing, and they, you know, they came out to LA from film school and were like, let's not think, how do we raise money to make this big idea? Let's go like reverse it and be like, we have only this much money. Okay, well, how do we use what we have to make the idea with that? And
the best we can
the
do.
DIY kind of mindset, you know, of going like, what's the best way we can utilize what we already have access to?
Yeah.
So I live by that too, you know, like filmmaking is hard, and, you know, you have to always be leveraging your resources and your relationships with people. So yeah, so if I'm like really, I can tell when I'm like buzzing on an idea, like I'm gonna make this, then the next question is like, who is gonna help me do it? And it's also like, when is it happening, and how are we gonna, you know, you start putting together the package of the train going on the track, and that's the process. yeah. Just, I mean, for me at least, you know, it's just like, it just starts rolling into motion, and I don't like to second guess it too much, because then that's when you know, maybe this isn't worth doing, you know, and that's where you can get kind of caught and stuck. And I've had projects derail like that before too. So you learn from, yeah. So you know, yeah.
What's it like kind of working like directly with the artist? Is there any time where you guys have either like a conflict, or the artist wants to do something else? Like, how do you have a creative, like, how do you share your creative vision with their creative vision for the music video?
Right. Such a good question. I mean, honestly, the artist is like the client, I guess, you know? So it's really important to me, if I'm going to make like a music video for an artist, that I'm not like, hey, I'm going to make you a short film with your money, you know? Like, that's not what they're hiring you for. It's kind of, at the end of the day, a music video is like an advertisement for a song or for a single, you know? So you have to still kind of keep that sober mindset of like, this is their song, and they have a vision for who they want to be presented as. So I always try to ask a lot of questions going in and be like, okay, well, like, what inspired the song? What inspired the music? What's the bigger direction that you're going for with your album right now? If you have an album, you know, sometimes they don't, but what's the bigger like dream and direction that you're kind of going towards? And some artists, that they have answers to all those questions, but I'd find that like a lot of them are really looking for creative direction. Like a lot of them are like, hey, I write music, and what kind of ideas do you have? You know, they like kind of throw it back at you. So it's definitely a collaboration. They're the closest collaborator in a music video, I think. And it's important, I think, to have the ability to just have like a direct connection to them. For me, at least, you know, like some music videos, you might be working with like a really cloudy artist that's really hard to reach. And then you have to go through like 20 people to just talk to them and get approvals. And that's fine. But man, is it just like so much easier if you can just get that direct line, because then you can get right to the source and be like, what are you really trying to do here? So I try to keep it very collaborative. And I even like have them sit in on edits and stuff at the end. Like, I don't want any surprises, and I don't want them to, you know, all of a sudden be like, I actually don't like this. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, like, they have the power to shelve the video, you know, they have the power to be like, actually, I don't want to put this out. So I think it's just super important to be like clear about the ideas. And then if I'm like extremely clear and verbose about what I'm thinking, then they will in my experience, they'll trust me more and be more willing to let me try something really unusual. Cause I'll be like, yeah, I mean, that's the idea. Like, we were going to do that crazy thing where we're going to have it all be like that. And then they're like, okay, yeah. Okay, you're right. And we did talk about that. And just like anybody else, an artist can get cold feet and be like afraid to take a risk. Like, you know, music videos are like totally freeform. Like, you can have a music video be a performance video, or you can have it be a narrative, or you can have it be somewhere in between. And sometimes artists have an idea of what they want it to be. Like, they're like, I just want to perform. I just want you to see a simple performance. And introducing more ideas in that might be like a question mark for them. And it's a journey. And if they're like into that, you can kind of lean down that road. But if they're not sure, it's like
you can help to guide them, maybe
dialogue. It's like, do you know, and maybe they are right. And that's the thing, is like, at the end of the day, like, they might know best what their brand is. So it is important, I think, to like really listen to them and be like, okay, so you don't, like, I'm just using a random example. It's like, if you don't want to be if you just want to be performing or you want it to be a one take performance or something, like what is the reason why you're looking for that kind of content right now? Is it because you want it to like feel really realistic, or is it because you want to present yourself as a performer? Like, you know, just trying to get to the root of what they're going for. And then you might be able to take a spin on it and make it even more unusual or like more interesting than what you've already seen out there.
Yeah, make it special.
Yeah.
Apart.
Yeah, because we're competing with like so much content these days that I'm always thinking like, what's something I haven't seen? What's something that like I would just be like surprised to see, you know? Because like I'm not trying to just like take from everything and make a music video treatment, like a mood board to everybody else's work. I'm often trying to think like, what's the direction to take this that's like definitely different and would help this artist also to like what that aligns with what the artist sees themselves to be right now and what they're trying, where they're trying to go, and taking them to that is the complicated, you know, trigonometry of music video directing.
Right. Because sometimes they might not even know exactly where they're trying to go. And
they might not. Yeah. So yeah, you can kind of start to try to speak their language and be like, okay, well, you really like Prince. So let's watch some Prince videos and like what, okay, like this, or, you know, there's a million ways you can kind of get in there, but you have to kind of level with them and really like try to figure out what it is that they're exploring as an artist and how you're visually going to help them.
So you want to talk a little bit about some of the narrative work that you've done?
When I was back at Biola, I did a thesis film called Birthday in a Dark Room, and that was like a exploration of self at the time for me. Like it's a mixture of journal writings and I actually kind of originally wrote it as like a play. Because as I was telling you, like I was a theater kid, so I was very familiar with like less than looking at screenplay. It was more familiar for me to look at a play. So I just wrote a bunch of ideas down, and then that turned into a play, and I was going to do it as like a little play. And then I sort of started showing it to friends and stuff, and they were like, you should probably make this your senior project. So that one turned into a short. When I came out of Biola, I was like hungry to do more narrative, but as a lot of film students might find, like as you leave film school, it's just like, oh, how do I get the resources to make anything? Right. You know, you're on your own, and getting narrative off the ground is the hardest, because it's like, who's going to fund it if you don't have like some proven track record, or you're your foot in the door already kind of thing, you know? So selling a script is a lot of people's like first way to go, you know? But for me, I was like more as capital D director, lowercase s screenwriter, I guess is the way I would see myself. Like I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to like churn out a bunch of specs and go sell something right now. So I kind of started experimenting with form a little bit, I guess. Like, I mean, that's, again, I feel like experimentation is kind of like what I keep going back to. So I made a short in, 2017, I think. It was called 46 Blocks. And that was born of me living in downtown LA and witnessing the homeless community and the housing crisis. Like in the 2016, 2017 time, it was pretty bad. It's even worse now. But at the time I was just like, it was just right in front of my face. You know, I would walk every day down 3rd Street, down through the financial district, and end up over at a coffee shop. It was kind of my route. And I would go with my roommate sometimes, and sometimes I would go alone, and I would just walk down, work from the coffee shop, come back. And just the things I would encounter on a day-to-day basis were insane. I was just like kind of compelled to write this story about somebody that feels like they want to do something about this crisis, or about homelessness, or somebody that the human that they see on the street, and they go back and tell their roommate that they did all these things, and then they find out at the end that they didn't do any of them. So it was kind of this whole thing of passiveness, and how we're often, especially in LA, like we're passing somebody on the street, and I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but I often get into the like what ifs of like, if I had done something, or how do my actions like split into a million trees of possibilities of like, and is it positive or negative if I'm to do this or that, you know? So that was kind of where my head was at the time. And then I didn't write anything. I actually I maybe made a note like in my phone, and then I didn't write anything. And then I was like on endless jobs traveling, and I was in New York a lot at the time. I was working for a painter, but I would do all her like video capture. Okay. And so I was traveling for this painter, going around, and I was in New York, and I had all these actor friends that had moved up to New York. And Sundance had this like Ignite competition pop up, and so it motivated me to be like, let's make a short. And we basically sat down, like all the people I knew that wanted to be in it, and I told them the idea. And then I was like, okay, here's how we're going to do it, because we don't have a script. We're going to go, we only have tonight. And so I was like, we're going to go around the city tonight. Adam, my friend, was the lead actor. He was the main character. And then we had this other guy that I met that night that was his friend David, who dressed up like this houseless person, you know, so and had an acoustic guitar. And the whole idea was like they meet on the street, and Adam takes him around to all these, like, he takes him first to get pizza, and then he takes him to like this nice hotel and books, like first they go to a retail spot, he buys him some clothes, then they go to a hotel, and then he buys him a room for the night, and then he walks home and he walks through Times Square. So we kind of had a rough idea of where we're gonna go, and we just did all this, but I shot it like a doc. Like I just let them be in character the whole time. So even on the subway, like going into the city, we were in character, and I was getting shots of Adam. And then when I sort of set them up, staged it, and then I just let them like interact, and I would just shoot as much as I could of each area, and we'd move. And then once we were done shooting in Times Square, like we'd finished our like trail, you know, that I had kind of like mapped out. We went back to their apartment, and then I had Adam and Sarah, his friend, act opposite him, and I had them do like an improvised conversation where Adam recounted the events of the night, and they dialogued about it. And they're both trained actors, so they were able to like carry on a pretty convincing dialogue that he did all these things. But then the ending of the film, I had him record, like I had another like alt thing where I had him say like, where she says something along the lines of like, you didn't walk 46 blocks. And he's like, I did. I just walked 46 blocks. And she's like, you're not even sweaty, you know? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, so you didn't do any of that stuff, did you? And he's like, no. And then it just ends. So we basically had like him recount all the things that he experienced and what it meant to him. And then you kind of realize it was all just sort of a fantasy, and he was just sort of like on the train the whole time. But it was this weird experimental way of getting there, and definitely didn't have a script. So it was like, I was trying to kind of like play with form a little bit, using some of the theater roots, using, you know, really relying on the actors to sort of like bring to life these characters. And it definitely worked. I mean, like I was proud of that little thing. It was definitely like a lo-fi kind of doc style short. I'm really interested in like ways to get realism, you know, so that was like a totally different departure from Birthday in a Dark Room, which was really scripted and really just beat by beat, like rehearsed. You know, and this was like, we're gonna record, we're gonna do a thing, and then you're gonna talk about the memory of doing it, and then we're gonna make that a short, you know, and that basically that conversation became the narrative anchor for the short. So the dialogue between the two of them is sort of like what we keep going back to, and that ties it together, so it doesn't just feel like this weird random documentary, of people walking around the streets. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so those were like two projects that kind of happened, and then but since then I've been writing a horror short, and I've been working on a feature. So I have a feature, and they're totally unrelated, but they're both horror. So I've been diving into horror in the writing world for a while, and haven't actually directed any of that yet. So that'll be an interesting kind of next step for me.
Yeah, I actually really like horror. There's a very, I don't know, horror is so primal. And it, you know, it draws all these emotions out of you. And I think there's also like a lot of cool things you can do with it, like the supernatural. You can go, yeah. It's just like I just love the thrill aspect of like, you know, who did it, who committed the crime? Is it a ghost? Is it a person? Like what's going on? And like that whole mystery unraveling. And a lot of it's also psychological too, which I also love, psychological thrillers. And you have a lot of that in horror as well.
Yeah, for me, like I was drawn into film a lot through the horror genre. I grew up watching Hitchcock movies. You know, I watched a lot of M. Night Shyamalan growing up. Like his movies were coming out, you know, like when I was in my youth and stuff. So yeah, I was always really fascinated by the idea of having, like what you're talking about, that primal instinct kind of getting activated. I didn't think of it that way when I was young, but now knowing how psychologically like film genres work, you know, it's actually really similar to comedy. When you're writing horror, you're writing kind of like touching on the truth of things and skirting around it, and also like it's that primal fear that really anchors it, whereas like in comedy you're laughing because you're uncomfortable. Similar in horror, you're afraid because you're uncomfortable, or you might be people might be laughing in a horror film because they are uncomfortable. So it's really just that dread, and that I really like that tone and how you can explore that, and how you can kind of like make people think about things like you said, like the supernatural, or thinking deeper even about like what Jordan Peele's doing, with like big discussions in culture that need to happen, and how you can kind of like plant those in genre and have those be a vehicle. So I'm super interested in that. Like that's like, I love genre storytelling. I like, that's like, to me, like one of the coolest things. It's like you have these different traditional styles of telling stories, and genre isn't, I don't see it as like a box. I almost see it more as like a focus. Like you can kind of do something really strong with a genre, because it's like that's the type of thing that people get, like with a whodunit, like you can explore a mystery, and it leaves so much room for surprise. And I don't know, I think there's just a lot to be explored in genre filmmaking in general. Like horror is just like one vehicle that can either be done really cheaply or really high budget, and that's another thing that's really interesting about it too.
Yeah, and a lot of directors start out doing horror, like then they'll move into something that, like, I'm thinking like Sam Raimi or Scott Derrickson, like they do horror, then they move in and then do other things too. But like I think it's a good starting ground, especially for like a first feature or first film, like you said, because it is cheaper, and then also I think it also plays well like internationally too. Like horror is like a very comedy sometimes is tricky because like it's funny here in America, but then other countries it's like, oh, we don't really get it. But I think horror is one of those things that's very universal. Like we all get scared. And it's
something lurking off camera, or like on the edge of frame, or even just a character reacting to something really scary is like a universally emotional feeling that any audience will understand. It's like a language that's universal, like music, and I don't know, like I think it's Stanley Kubrick that has that quote, cinema is more like music and less like fiction. And I actually like adhere to that a lot, because like I don't know if you think about it, like when you're watching a movie, it's not the same as like when you're reading a novel, where you're analytically connecting all these dots, and you're seeing inside this character's head, and you're understanding their thought process and where they're going. Like while you're watching a film, maybe you're getting some of that context, but maybe you're not, and maybe you're intentionally being left out of the context of the situation,
right? Or
just even the idea of how like when you put two shots together, it's like the editing thing of like 1 + 1 = 3, like the thing that it informs the other thing, so with movies, like there's just so much opportunity. It's similar to like how music affects us, where you're just feeling something as you're seeing it, and horror is a perfect example of that. Like you just go on a ride when you go see a really scary movie in theaters. You're just taken on a ride, it's like a thrill that some people really hate and some people really enjoy, But Jordan Peele, for example, is like doing it in a way where sometimes it's not even extremely scary, but it's just the commentary that's packaged in there that's so powerful.
Yeah, social commentary.
Yeah. Which I think that's like so cool. The fact that you can have like highbrow horror, and I guess lowbrow horror, but maybe both of them, highbrow and lowbrow, are like at the same time too, you know? So yeah, I've always been really drawn into that. And like that was like for me from as a kid, I was always trying to like sneak away and watch scary movies I wasn't supposed to watch too and stuff, like I remember when The Ring came out, and like there was like a sleepover at my house and my sisters had it on with all their friends, and I was definitely not supposed to be watching it, but I was watching The Ring. I was watching it like through a reflection of a mirror, and I was terrified. But I was just like, this is so crazy that this movie has so much power over this like group of people right now, and that one was like iconic because you have the TV fuzz, and and so like watching it at home on a TV is like the scariest way to watch it, and that's that's just the power of movies. But horror specifically, it's like it takes you somewhere dark, and that's not something that we like as a culture intentionally go do very often. Like, talk about death, talk about sex, talk about edgy subjects, or things that racism. Like those are the things that like
They're a
we
little more
hide.
taboo. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like horror does, I think it's really cool that it's like a genre that's intentionally like, going there and actually drawing lines between dark and light and showing you kind of like the gray too. Like Flannery O'Connor books are like so interesting for that reason, because it's like you're literally like the grotesque is in your face and it causes something in the viewer or in her case like the reader to really confront that darkness and question it and deal with it, because it's now in your face. That trauma maybe isn't something you've experienced in life, or maybe it is, but whatever it does is like by bringing it to the surface, you're now forced to deal with it rather than, just kind of pretending everything's okay all the time,
Yeah. Maybe you can tell me a little bit some of the advice that you've gotten over the years.
I think some of the best advice I've gotten from people is to just do rather than to talk. I'm not sure exactly if it's come from just one source, but I've seen it modeled a lot from like mentors and figures I look up to. Okay, so here's a good one actually. This is a good advice. So there's a guy named Calder that is a production designer that has come out to our OMG camps, and he's an artist, but he works in movies. And there was a specific instance where I was building a prop for an OMG video, so like a kid directed music video that we were doing. And I was quickly trying to build like a TV out of cardboard. And I look over and they're shooting it already with Calder's TV that he built out of cardboard. And I was like, oh, I was literally I was putting this together. And then like at lunch, I sat down next to him and I was like, hey, like that was crazy. I was building a TV. You were building a TV. You finished it quicker. Like, I was like, and then he was like, yeah, man. He's like, well, the thing that I've learned in this industry is that like, it's not a prop if it's not ready for camera. And I was like, it just got me thinking where it's like, sometimes you have to think on your feet. Sometimes you have to be ready to just get in front of the camera and be making it while the camera's rolling. Sometimes, it's like this medium is a very fast paced and extremely hands-on medium. And I think it's easy sometimes for us to get stuck up here and think about perfectionism and try to spend a lot of time getting something ready to go on camera. But I mean, this can apply to all kinds of things. Like it can apply to acting. It can apply to, DPing, whatever. If you can be like your process can be like active and hands-on and be in motion with the collaborators around you and really trusting that's where really cool stuff gets made. But the minute you start trying to like check the boxes on a shot list, or just going back to the very like, analytical way of filmmaking, I feel like for me at least, that's where it starts to fall apart a little bit, because I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, that makes a total sense. Yeah. I think that's even applicable to just life in general.
Yeah.
It's like you have to always be ready to go. It's like if you're not ready to go, then there's no point in it. It's not going to change. It's not going to do anything. So if it's showtime and you're not ready, it doesn't matter how much you prepared beforehand if you're not there.
Yeah, it's like it's really just like an analogy to say like you just always be in the moment. It's like a performer needs to be ready to perform at any given moment, and actors need to be in character. Like it's the same kind of thing, but I feel like it's easy to forget that in film when you're like, oh, the light needs to be here and like it doesn't look like my mood board and whatever, and like it's just to let that go and be like, we're creating something right now. This is what it's going to be. This is what it looks like, and how can we make this better? Do we need to throw plant in there? Do we need to like do we need to haze it up a little bit more? But like whatever we're doing, it's like we're already doing it. And I think that kind of think on your feet mentality of creating is something that I don't know if it's trained. I think it's just something that's like learned by, like what Calder was saying, like he learned that early on, that a prop's not a prop if it's not ready for the camera. Because he probably made a lot of stuff that wasn't ready for camera, and then he was like, I just spent hours laboring over this thing. It's not even in the shot. It's not even going to be in the cut now. It's not going to go down the pipeline of being in the film. So someone like him is just someone that I was like, how do you do this? Because he was literally like taking cardboard and like as he was moving it, he was putting tape on it. It was just like things are becoming props like in just seconds, and it's just he just got used to working that way, where it's like it's got to be ready, ready for the camera, and the camera's already moving towards me. So
right. No, that's excellent advice. Do you have any regrets in your life as far as maybe like your career or And then maybe how have you learned or taken those regrets and, made it work for you?
I think comparison is like a super dangerous territory in film, and I think it's set me back. So I think for me, like, I don't really call it a regret, but I think I've spent a lot of time looking at my peers and being like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to be doing that in film specifically. And we're also in an age of social media, and how I don't even know if we have the statistics yet to tell us how much it's affected us and our perception of ourselves by having it constantly being reflected outwardly onto our social lives on the internet. So like there is this aspect of like comparison that happens naturally, and this isn't just in filmmaking. It's people's self-image all the time. But I think it's definitely affected me in terms of what I want to be creating as a creative person, and losing sight of that and getting wrapped up in my head, getting down depressive rabbit holes of thinking like, I'm not good enough at this, or they're doing it better, or how are they already here when I'm just barely here, just barely starting. And I would say that like that's probably mental gymnastics has set me back. And that's like a hard process of getting beyond that and going like, wait a second, I never came out here to do that anyway. So like, why am I even looking at it? So I think that that's just a constant learning process, but like
for sure.
In terms of regrets, I guess I would look at it as like, I've probably wasted a lot of time trying to match my peers or do what I think I'm supposed to be doing. And at the end of the day, like, well, this podcast is about, telling stories is really why we're here, and our own unique stories are something that no one else is going to tell. So that's really the assignment,
it's like not being other people and not comparing yourself.
Yeah. And especially in this industry, because I think it's like, it's very competitive. It's very image based. And, sometimes it's really easy to start believing other people's narrative that they're spewing, their own publicity that they're so good at putting out. And then you're like, oh, well, I guess I'm not there yet. And that's a dead zone. You can't go there, because like the reality is like you're setting out to do something completely different. And every single filmmaker every single writer is setting out to do something completely different. Like
we're all on our own journeys.
If you wanted to write that X TV show or whatever, like someone already did. So you're not setting out to make the next X. You're setting out to make the first of you. And I think that's just like a really tricky thing as any artist to kind of step out and be like, there's also that question of ego of like, should I be stepping out to tell my story? Is my story really what people need right now? And I think those types of things are also snags that I've gotten myself into, being like, is it the moment for me to say this? Is it the moment for me? And, it's just another form of overthinking, and yes, not to say there isn't stories that I probably shouldn't tell, or stories that I shouldn't be like putting on a pedestal. If you have that like buzz to do something specific, or really like feel compelled to tell a certain kind of story or make a certain kind of work of art, you really got to follow that. Because it's your intuition telling you that, it's not anyone else. So like, just trusting that inner voice and just spiritually trusting yourself and going like deeper in to that instinct is something I've been working on for like the last year and a half, and trying to listen to intuition even more, because it's really like that's the true north that you have to follow.
And like I feel like God gives everyone like inspiration and like our creative like zeitgeist, and I think changes everything, because you're not striving, you're not like, oh, I can't, but you're just like trusting yourself. It's like, okay, I feel like this is really what I need to do. And like you were saying before, just like you go for it, go all out, don't half step. Don't be like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like you just got to like put everything you have into it and just go for it. And then that's when you're able to accomplish things that most other people are not going to be able to accomplish.
Like you doing this podcast, you have to just do what you're good at and what you're set out to do. And like the zeitgeist is a culture defined thing. If you're trying to hit the zeitgeist, I think you're hitting a moving target that like is already so there's something to like your individuality and your voice. It's been predetermined. You're here for a reason. If you're a storyteller, really like sinking into that and going like, what is it that why did I wake up in the morning still wanting to be a filmmaker today? Why don't I want to go research sustainable gardening so I can help the world with food or something? You know what I mean? Like and those types of things get on my mind all the time, where I'm like, well, I'm a very curious person. So like, I'm always, diving into new hobbies and interests, but there's never been a hobby or an interest of mine that's taken up as much of my brain as filmmaking has, because it's kind of like the biggest challenge of all is, making film for me is like, of all the arts, it's the all-encompassing art form, that really like brings together all the arts. So obviously something if I have that much interest in it, it's something I set out to do, and I'm here to do, So I feel like, just going for it and really just trusting that you're here for a reason to do it is like the hardest part. And I don't, like I said, I don't know if I would call it a regret, because I'm still doing it, but there has been a lot of moments of not trusting my own self. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Good. Good life lesson.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day too, you're an entrepreneur if you're a filmmaker.
Yeah.
So you have to get used to failure, and you have to get used to accepting that failure is teaching you something. And I think that that's something that like really was difficult for me, like moving out to LA and then realizing like I'm a grassroots filmmaker, I don't have I'm not from like a trust fund or anything like that. So right. I came out like with a pretty big dream, with a lot of work ahead of me to figure it out. And it's like building a business, you truly have to go, okay, well, how am I going to fund this venture? Like if you're going to make a short film, where's the money going to come from to make that short? Is there like legs for it to turn into a feature? Or what's the goal with the short? And so you really have to have a lot of forecasting and visioning that you're doing just for the business side of things, alongside of the storytelling itself. Yeah. I think there's just like a lot to learn and it's important to stay open to all those things and bring in collaborators that can help you where you're not good at maybe like a skill.
Right.
So there's always somebody that can kind of come in alongside you and help make what you're doing even more rock solid. That's another thing, I guess. If I have a regret too, it's that like I think I just in the last couple of years have been really valuing building a team of people. And I think for a while I was trying to like, I don't know what I was trying to prove, but just individually I was trying to like do everything myself. I was trying to edit, I was trying to direct, I was trying to pitch, I was like shooting, and it's just no. Like these are, I mean, it's good to learn these things, don't get me wrong, this is skills that like I'll take with me, but
you're just one person,
and like the team, the team quality of like having like somebody else that's sharing this baby with you is going to help you so much more when you get to that like last 10%, which is like the hardest part. And you really got to push it over the finish line. And if you're just alone, like I've been there, I've been there on like documentary thing I did one time. It took me like 6 months in the edit, and it was just like, half of it was in Spanish, and I'm not fluent in Spanish, so I had to send it off for translation and stuff. I was like, it was also during COVID that I was editing this thing, and I was just in a silo, and I was like, this can't be it, shooting it was really like communal, because I went out to Mexico and filmed this whole thing. But then in COVID, I was alone editing it in a room for 6 months, and I really had a moment of realizing like, I don't want to do filmmaking in a bubble. Like I don't want to do filmmaking in my own silo. This is a communal art form that I want to be in community with people creating something at every step of the way. Script to final export. Need those collaborators. You need those people to bounce off of.
Absolutely. Yeah. Where do you kind of see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? Like what's your goal?
While I was back in film school, like around the time I met you at Biola, I was thinking 5 to 10 years from now, I'll be, directing a feature. But I was also in my head, I think at the time I was like, oh, I'll probably be like making music videos in LA. So there's this like realistic side of me too, though, where I'm kind of doing exactly what I thought I would have been doing 5 years ago. 5 to 10 years from now, I don't know. Like I think I want to be definitely more involved in the narrative space. I'm more interested now in television than I ever was. So I've been thinking about writing for series and stuff more too. I think I want to be more involved in the industry as a writer and not just as a director, but I've been spending a lot of time building up my directing chops so I can hopefully direct the things I write. So that's kind of the trajectory for me, is like I want to be more of a career writer than I am now, making writing more of a priority. And I could be in LA. I could also see myself in another film city like Mexico City or New York or something like that. I've always thought it'd be cool to like move out to like Mexico City for a year and do film there, or move to New York for a year and do film there. But I think at the end of the day, like LA will be like a home for what I do.
Yeah.
So 5 to 10 years from now, who knows? Maybe have a family, maybe settle down a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, film isn't my whole life.
Yeah.
But,
No, I think that's great. Like I tell people all the time, it's like your career is not your life. Your friends, your family, like that's really important too. And you don't want to like be so focused on a career that you forget.
Yeah, it can take over. And I've learned that too. The hustle, you know, as we call it, and like how toxic that can be, you know, just letting it completely consume you. So yeah, I guess like I want to be a little bit more chill in 5 10 years. Have like more narrative projects that I'm maybe making money and selling, you know, and actually being able to like do that as a not just as a passion project, but as something that supports me. Because yeah, I think at the end of the day, like the storytelling that I'm learning with music videos and the experimentation I'm doing with music videos, I've been viewing that as an exercise to get stronger at my filmmaking chops and be able to take that with me in a narrative. Commercials will always be there as a hustle.
Right.
It's like commercial world is like the ad world never rests.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
They're always making ads.
Yeah.
But that's not my ambition. You know, like commercial directing is really fun and I do enjoy it. So I'm going to probably be doing more of that in the next 5 years too. But have a lot of narrative ideas in me too that I would love to see hit the screen. So yeah.
Absolutely. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been such a fun talk we've had and learning so much and it's getting that different perspective on things. So yeah, I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nathan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I know you're not big on Instagram, but like
actually, on Instagram is probably the best way. Okay. My Instagram handle's Jeff Pross, and then my website is www.jeffpross.com. So
perfect.
Those are where you can find most of the work or what I'm up to.
Awesome. Cool, man. Well, thanks again. Appreciate it. And thank you guys for watching, and make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys next time.